all the signs, the telltale scars are still here. It's just that now you need to look harder to find them. It was early in February 1983 that the fires of Ash Wednesday devastated this town of Macedon just north of Melbourne. The speed and the magnitude of the destruction left this nation numb and bewildered. But now, a mere 3 years later, time, nature and hard work have all but healed the wounds. On the outside at least, Ash Wednesday seems to have paled into history. On the inside, however, it's very different. Victorians have vivid memories of that worst ever February day. For most, it's become a benchmark. Americans recall exactly what they were doing the day Kennedy was gunned down. And Victorians, well, they remember Ash Wednesday. In the struggle to find anything positive about a disaster of this scope, you find the lessons learned about bushfires and the actions taken to ensure that another Ash Wednesday never again ravages this state. New housing construction designs to minimise the risk, improved fire techniques and communications between firefighting agencies. But perhaps the greatest impact of all can be seen in the operations and philosophy of the State Electricity Commission, whose assets were involved in a number of fires of that day. The SEC's Chief General Manager is Mr. Jim Smith. Like all Victorians, he too remembers Ash Wednesday.
So, well, I, like all Victorians, have a vivid recollection of that day. It was as though we were all involved in a great drama. We could feel the loss that was being experienced of life, of property, as that terrible fire just raged through Victoria.
Well, what's the SEC's, if you like, corporate commitment to bushfire mitigation?
Well, fires, of course, can cause tremendous loss of life, tremendous loss of property. And it's that, of course, which gives rise to our determination, our commitment to make our bushfire mitigation activities such a high priority task amongst our management and our staff. The cost of a bushfire like that on Ash Wednesday to people in Victoria, the cost to the SEC is just so huge that we just have to be committed to a program that is really very, very extensive. Do you know that this year alone we are spending $95 million on activities that are concerned with mitigating the risk of bushfires?
Are you talking about a personal commitment to bushfire mitigation?
Oh yes, I think that all of us at the senior management ranks are absolutely committed to ensuring that we never again have an experience like that. It's almost like a war against an enemy.
Bushfire mitigation works are presently costing the SEC many millions of dollars annually. Indeed, it's a program of massive proportion now, and it's expanding all of the time. The man at whose desk the bushfire mitigation buck stops is Mr. Tony Wilson, the SEC's Chief Engineer Distribution.
It came up through the valley over there and up the side of the mountain.
Wilson is a man known for his straight shooting, yet sensitive management style. But is the responsibility of the SEC's bushfire mitigation program a burden too heavy for one man?
Yes, in some ways it's an awesome responsibility. But I share it with 3,500 people who are out there in the field doing the work. They're managing it. They're making sure it all happens. None of them, and certainly I don't want to see it happen again. It's part of a team effort.
Well, could you put bushfire mitigation into some form of context, if you like, some sort of corporate context?
I guess the easiest way to understand it is think of it in terms of the dimensions people normally understand and measure their electricity authorities by. Service, reliability and price. In Victoria, because of our peculiar environment, we've had to add a fourth dimension, bushfire mitigation. And what we've done is apply the same management techniques, the same technology, the same understandings and priorities to bushfire mitigation that we've applied to those other three normal dimensions.
Well, at this stage, can you say that you know what causes bushfires in Victoria?
I'm certain we can. Based on the Barber inquiry of 77, the inquests of 83, and all that we know and understand, both before the 83 and since 83, we know what causes fires. We know more than that, though. We know how to go about stopping those ignition sources occurring, what actions are necessary. We're out there in the field doing them, making sure they happen, and we're measuring and monitoring it and managing the process so that we know what is happening and how well it's happening.
Well, you mentioned that you now know what causes fires. So could I ask you just how important trees are in a bushfire mitigation program?
All of the investigations have shown that trees are the biggest and basic problem associated with ignition from electricity assets. And our approach has been, as it is with all of our inspection programs, we're on a 3-year cycle of inspection and cutting to a code which is established so that the trees won't grow back in the lines in that 3-year period.
Well, how much of your resources at the moment are going towards tree cutting?
A major portion of the $95 million we're spending on bushfire mitigation this year will go to tree cutting. In addition to our own resources, our linesmen and our own tree fellers, we have a fairly large contract force with machinery, fully engaged on cutting to code prior to the bushfire season. It happens all year round, not just in the summer. We cut throughout the year so we keep the code cycle going. Clashing conductors were identified clearly as one of the prime causes in the 83 inquests. Since then, we've virtually eliminated clashing conductors through 3 mechanisms. Firstly, keeping trees clear. Secondly, fitting spreaders into spans of low voltage. And thirdly, eliminating, where we can, any low voltage conductors out of the system.
You're still well and truly in touch with consultative groups like environmental groups too, aren't you?
We've had to keep the pressure up all the time on the need to cut trees. And without the support of the community groups, that would fall flat very quickly and we could return again to the 83 situation. It's particularly important that we have the consultative mechanisms such as the Tree Clearance Consultative Committee and local consultative committee in environmentally sensitive areas to keep the community aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
You've just started recently, I understand, to use aircraft, light aircraft, to inspect lines. How much of emphasis are you putting on that? What sort of emphasis are you putting on it?
A lot of emphasis. The approach we're using with aircraft is that on the 3-year cutting cycle, this year we cut 1/3 of any given area. The other 2 areas need to be inspected to ensure that any regrowth that's occurred hasn't come near the lines. Particularly in inaccessible areas, the aircraft is a valuable and very cost-effective tool when it's flying over and near the power lines to ensure that those trees are clear. We do it from about October through to the end of January as a last-minute check to make sure everything is in fact clear, and it's proven to be most successful.
The other sort of power line, of course, that you're concerned with is the privately owned power line, the one running from the outside line on the road into a private residence across private property. That was involved in Ash Wednesday too, wasn't it?
Yes. There have been a couple of mechanisms again used there to ensure that they are properly taken care of. The first was the legislation, the Clearance of Lines Act, which was brought in, and that ensured that the owners of the lines were clearly identified as being responsible for keeping those lines in a good state and clear of trees. But we don't stop there. We go ahead and inspect them on again, our 3-year cycle. We inspect them. If there's anything wrong with the lines, we issue defect notices and we ensure that they are repaired or disconnected.
What about undergrounding?
Any new lines, any new private service lines, are to be constructed underground unless significant hardship can be shown. Any lines that are to be repaired, if more than 30% of them needs replacing, then they're to be replaced with underground, totally underground lines. We've got 110,000 private service lines in Victoria. In our 3 years just finished, we've defected over 20,000 of them. 10,000 have been repaired, 8,000 have gone underground, about 1,500 have been replaced with new high voltage installations, and the remainder have been permanently disconnected. So we believe we've covered that area very well and with a lot of support from the farming community.
Well, how much of a consideration are the actual poles in terms of your bushfire mitigation work?
In Victoria, we have predominantly a timber pole population, and so we have to take pole inspection and replacement very seriously. We have 1 million poles, and we find that each year we have to replace about 1 to 1.5% of them.
And how do you organise that?
Any pole that's considered to be, the rot's so advanced that it's considered to be dangerous, is declared to be unserviceable, and it must be replaced within 6 weeks. Poles that are advanced enough in rot so that they'll only last until the next 3-year cycle are declared limited life, and they must be replaced within 12 months.
And can you guarantee that your inspection people are accurate in their assessments of poles?
Yes, the inspectors are regularly checked by their own supervisors, and they're also regularly got together where we cut up the butts that they've condemned to make sure that they are treating with them seriously and appropriately. We're not changing too many poles, we're not changing too few poles.
What about the use of chemicals in the area of rot, for example?
In the last 2 or 3 years, we've been trialling a system called Blue 7. We are now going into production use of Blue 7. It's proven to be very successful in retarding rot considerably, and in many cases, the rot stops altogether and the pole life is significantly extended.
Are you keen on the practice of pole staking, I think you refer to it as?
Yes, we've been using pole staking as a very effective, cost-effective method of restoring the pole to its original strength, driving 2 or 3 steel stakes down the side of the pole and band attaching those stakes to the pole, as I said, restoring it to its original strength. Another technique we've been using recently is pole rebutting, where we have a machine that physically lifts the whole pole out of the ground. The rotten part of the bottom is cut off, replaced with a concrete new butt, and then the two are welded together with a steel sleeve. Again, restoring the pole to its original strength in the same position as it was originally.
Well, that's a concrete butt. Is there a place for complete new concrete poles in Victoria?
Yes. The recent changes in cost structures between timber and concrete poles have meant that we are now purchasing between 60 and 70% of our poles of the concrete type. In the long term, that will shift our pole population very significantly away from timber into concrete, but it'll take many years.
Well, you've mentioned poles, you've mentioned trees. What about other SEC assets that could be involved in fire risk situation?
They're treated with in exactly the same way as the poles are. They're on a 3-year inspection cycle. Our inspectors are trained so that they know what to look for, how to identify it, what goes wrong with the various aerial assets. They're reported upon regularly in the 3-year cycle, and they're put into the program to make sure that they're repaired or replaced in time so that they don't constitute a hazard.
Are you talking about substations, insulators, that sort of thing?
I'm talking about everything that's in the air that's electrical.
And fuses?
Fuses are something where we've spent a lot of time and money with manufacturers developing new types and new styles of fuses to absolutely minimise the fire risk. That program has now been successfully completed, and those new types of fuses are now in production.
All right, come the fire risk season, have you got a contingency plan?
Yes, we do. At the beginning of each bushfire season, each region and district identifies any outstanding work that they consider should be done before the season actually gets underway. And that's to ensure that if a day of extreme fire danger should arise, we can actually disconnect that area from supply.
And have you had to switch off in the past?
No, we haven't had to at this stage because at the same time it's identified, it's also given the highest possible priority to ensure that the work is completed before days of extreme fire danger start.
Well, with the work involved in your 3-year cycle of inspection and so on, surely there's a mass of information involved. How do you physically handle that?
What we've done is institute a monthly reporting system where the districts and regions report through the chain of command to me the work that's been done and the work that's yet outstanding, the progress to date and how they're getting on with the whole job. That so far has been done on a manual basis, but we are implementing new computer systems that will automatically flow that information through so that we can ensure that the program remains on target and within priorities at all times.
Now, is management involved in inspections to see that this sort of work is actually happening in the field?
Yes. At the beginning of each season, myself, the Chief General Manager, Jim Smith, the Deputy Chief General Manager, Clem Joyce, and other senior management members go out, visit districts, go through with them their reporting systems, go through with them their recording of faults, and actually go out in the field and have a look at the work that is being done and has been done to ensure that there is a complete commitment by management and the people to the program we're involved in.
25 on that. Yeah.
Well, what about the future? What about research and development, for example?
Tree cutting is our biggest problem and probably one of our biggest expenses. We've been working with aerial bundle conductor, insulated conductor, that both reduces the amount of tree cutting involved and also ensures that the hazard from clashing is eliminated. We have some trial systems up in the air now and it's looking very promising. So far, it's been limited to low voltage cable, but we are also looking at developments in insulated high voltage cable that will further reduce the amount of tree cutting and reduce the risk even further again.
And what about new materials? And I'm thinking here of use in poles, for example.
We're looking at every possible innovation we can get onto. Plastic poles have only been a figment of the imagination up until recently. There are current developments which we're following through, which show some promise within 4 to 5 years of plastic poles becoming a reality. We're involved at the forefront of all of this technology.
Are birds a problem? Can they be a fire risk problem? And are you concerned about them?
Yes, not normally on days of extreme fire danger because the bird activity is usually very low on those days. But birds contacting between the conductor and earth parts of the structure can be a fire hazard. We're both increasing the distance between the conductors and the earth structures by using longer insulators. Where we can't do that, we're putting plastic covers over steel crossarms, bird covers, to again reduce the risk to an absolute minimum.
Of course, the bottom line is often a cry for undergrounding. Put the cables underground, remove the risk of fire. Are you involved in undergrounding?
Yes, we are. Undergrounding the whole of the state system in the rural areas is obviously prohibitively expensive. But what we're trying to do is encourage as much undergrounding as we can. We've put up a fund, the SEC, of $1 million each year to fund underground projects in areas of environmental importance on a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1 basis. The shires, community groups, councils, if they put forward projects and they fit the criteria, we'll fund them.
Well, that's Tony Wilson, SEC engineer. How do you personally feel about this sort of work, bushfire mitigation, on a scale of the size of the state of Victoria?
I think it's both a big responsibility, an enormous challenge, and a very exciting challenge, because we have an opportunity here to make sure that the job we're doing in distributing electricity to the people of Victoria doesn't bring with it an additional hazard of wild or bushfires. I'm here to do a job. I enjoy doing it, and I think it's an important job that is now reaping enormous benefits.
Clearly, bushfire mitigation in Victoria is a war. And the SEC is fighting it successfully with its resources of people and money on a scale never before attempted. But then, bushfire mitigation is a war where the stakes are extremely high. The fires of Ash Wednesday showed all Victorians just how high.